the temple and holding people outside until the governor arrived. Granada rolled a long red carpet from the edge of the property into the temple courtyard, and devotees were on both sides of the carpet chanting with kartals and mridangas. When the governor arrived, Surabi presented him with a garland. Immediately removing the garland, the governor walked down the red carpet and into the courtyard. Prabhupada stood. The devotees were amazed to see Prabhupada standing straight and shaking the governor's hand. Prabhupada and the governor stood together for a while and then sat down. Except for the guests, everyone present knew that Prabhupada was not capable of much exertion. They saw him shivering and trembling, yet trying to smile and be gracious with his guest. The devotees were in great anxiety, thinking that Prabhupada's life might end at any moment. Yet they took part in the social pretense along with their spiritual master. The governor, on invitation, gave a speech talking about how India's future lay in industry. Then Prabhupada stood to speak, leaning against the chair. His eyes were very dark, and he was barely able to focus his vision. Although he had spoken very little for almost 2 weeks, he now spoke for 20 minutes, while the governor listened politely. Afterward, Prabhupada sat in honored prashad with the governor and his entourage of 15 ministers. After the governor left, the devotees carried Prabhupada back in his room, where he collapsed with a 105-degree temperature. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Okay.
Speak louder because you have a mic.
Slower and louder. So we're going to read a few texts before we get to the one with the decent sized peppercorn. Okay. So reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya. This is chapter 16, the Lord's attempt to go to Vrindavan. So we'll start at 190. I'll just run through the Bengali until we get to 205. Tabi Mukunda Datta Kahi Shuna Mahashaya Gangatira Yati Mahaprabhora Manahaya. Mukunda Datta then told the Muslim governor, "My dear sir, please hear. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wishes to go to the bank of the Ganges. Tahanyadikara tumi sahaja prakara, ebada agya ebada upakara. Please give him all assistance so that he can go there. This is your first great order. And if you can comply, you will render a great service. Tabisema Mahaprabhora Charana Vandiya Sabara Chanara Vandi Chali Grishta Ana." After this, the Muslim governor offered prayers to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to the lotus feet of all his devotees. Then the governor departed. Indeed, he was very pleased. Mahapatra Tanrasani Koila Kola Kuli Anikas Samagri Diya Karila Mitali. Before the governor left, the Mahapatra embraced him and offered him many gifts. He thus established a friendship with him. Pratakali Sebahun Mukha Sajana Prabhuke Anite Dila Vishvasapatana. The next morning, the governor sent his secretary with many nicely decorated boats to bring Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the other side of the river. Mahapatra Chali Oila Mahaprabhora Sane Malacha Asi Koila Prabhora Charane Vandani. The Mahapatra crossed the river with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and when they reached the other shore, the Muslim governor personally received the Lord and worshipped his lotus feet. Ekanavina Nutka Taramachikara Swagane Chadaila Prabhu Tahara Upara. One of the boats had been nicely constructed, and it had a room in the middle. It was on this boat that they put Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. Mahapatri Mahaprabhu Karila Vidaya Kandati Kandite Saitiri Rahichaya. Finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade farewell to the Mahapatra. Standing on the river bank and looking at the boat, the Mahapatra began to cry. Jaladashu Baye Sayabana Chalila Dasanoika Bari Bahu Sena Sangi Nila. The Muslim governor then personally accompanied Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because of pirates, the governor took 10 boats full of many soldiers. Mantrashvara Dushta Nadi Para Karala Pichalda Paryanta Sayavana Aila. The Muslim governor accompanied Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu past Mantreshvara. This was very dangerous due to pirates. He took the Lord to a place named Pichalda, which was near Mantreshvara. Purple. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The very wide mouth of the Ganges near present-day Diamond Harbour was called Mantreshvara. Through the Ganges, the boat entered the Rupa Narayana River and reached the village of Pichalda. Pichalda and Mantreshvara are located very close together. After passing Mantreshvara, the Muslim governor, accompanied the Lord as far as Pichalda. Tanmay Vidaya Dela Prabhu Segrama Haite Sekale Tanra Prema Chastana Pari Vanite. Finally, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade the governor farewell. The intense ecstatic love exhibited by the governor cannot be described. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu bade farewell to the Muslim governor at Pichalda. Krishna Kaviraj Goswami herein states that the governor experienced symptoms of ecstatic love due to being separated from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These symptoms, he admits, cannot be described. Alokika Lila Kari Se Krishna Chaitanya Ye Ihash Shunetanra Janma Dehadanya. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes are all uncommon. Whoever listens to his activities becomes glorious, and his life becomes perfect. Sainaka Chadi Prabhu Oila Panihati Navikari Paraila Nija Kripa Sati. The Lord finally reached Panihati, and as an act of mercy, he gave the captain of the boat one of his personal garments. Prabhu Oila Bani Loke Hoila Kolahara Manusha Barila Saba Kiva Jala Stala. The place called Panihati was located on the bank of the Ganges. After hearing that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had arrived, all kinds of men assembled both on land and on water. The village of Panihati is situated on the banks of the Ganges near Kadada. Raghava Pandita Asi Prabhu Lana Gela Pati Yati Loka Bide Kashte Shrishte Aila. At length, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taken away by Raghava Pandit. There was a great crowd assembled along the way, and the Lord reached Raghava Pandit's residence with great difficulty. So text 205. So if everybody can respond after me, please. Ekadina Prabhu Tata Kariya Nivasa. Ekadina Prabhu Tata Kariya Nivasa.
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Kariya Nivasa. Prate
Kumarahate Aila Yahan Srinivas. Prati Kumarahate Aila Yahan Srinivasa.
Prate Kumarahate Aila Yahan Srinivasa.
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Kariya Nivasa.
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Kariya Nivasa.
Prati Kumarahate Aila Yahan Srinivasa.
Prate Kumarahate Aila Yahan Srinivasa.
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Karya Nivasa
Ekadina Prabhutata Kariya Nivasa
Rate Kumara Hate Aila Yahan Srinivasa
Rate Kumara Hatha Oila Yahan Srinivasa Ekadina Prabhutata Kariya Nivasa
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Karya Nivasa
Rate Kumara Hate Oila Yahan Srinivasa
Rate Kumara Hate Aila Yahan Srinivasa Ekadina Prabhu Tata Karya Nivasa
Ekadina Prabhutata Kariya Nivasa
Rate Kumara Hate Aila Yahan Srinivasa
Rate Kumara Hate Oila Yahan Srinivasa
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Karya Nivasa
Ekadina Prabhutata Kariya Nivasa Rate Kumara Hate Oila Yahan Srinivasa
What did you use?
Ekadina Prabhu Tata Karya Nivasa
Ekadina Prabhutata Kariya Nivasa Rate Kumara Hate Oila Yahan Srinivasa
Ekadina.
Ekadina
One day.
Prabhu
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Tata the Kariya Nivasa residing Prate in the morning Kumarahate
The town named Kumarahata.
the town in Kumarahata Oila reached Yahan where
Srinivas,
Srinivas
the home of Srivas Thakur.
the home of Srivas Thakur.
Translation. The Lord stayed at Raghava Pandit's place for only one day. The next morning he went to Kumarahata, where Srivas Thakur lived. Responsible, please. The Lord stayed at Raghava Pandit's place.
The Lord stayed at Raghava Pandit's place
for only one day.
for only one day.
The next morning,
he
went to Kumarahata,
where
Srivas Thakur lived.
Srivas Thakur lived.
The present name of Kumarahata is Hailasara. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas, Srivas Thakur left Navadvip due to separation from him and went to Hailasara to live. From Kumarahata, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Kanchanapali, also known as Kanchadapada, where Shivananda Sain lived. After staying 2 days at Shivananda's house, the Lord went to the house of Vasudeva. From there he went to the western side of Navadvip to the village called Vijayanagara. From Vijayanagara, he went to Kuliagram and stayed at Madhavadasa's house. He stayed there for 1 week and excused the offences of Devananda and others. Due to Kaviraj Goswami's mentioning the name of Shantipuracharya, some people think that Kulia is a village near Kanchadapada. Due to this mistaken idea, they invented another place known as New Kulayarapata. Actually, such a place does not exist. Leaving the house of Vasudeva Das, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the house of Advaita Acharya. From there he went to the western side of Navadvip to Vijayanagara and stayed at the house of Vijayavichaspati. These accounts are given in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Mangal, Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natika, and Chaitanya Charita Kavya. Srila Kaviraj Goswami has not vividly described this entire talk. Therefore, on the basis of Chaitanya Charitamrita, some unscrupulous people have invented a place called Kuliyarapata near Kanchadapada. Omagyanatimiranda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chakshiranmanitam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. the Lord stayed in Raghunath this place only one day. The next morning he went to Kumarahata, where Srivas Thakur lived. So it's interesting how specific and accurate the accounts are of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, because it is such an important subject matter, how we should be living our lives and what philosophy we should be applying. So it's very, very important subject matter. So we have to be sure that what is being presented is accurate. So it's interesting, Prabhupada mentions Chaitanya Mangam, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Chaitanya Chandrodaya Natika, and Chaitanya Charita Kavya. So these all cross-reference each other. And then Lord Chaitanya also, as well as asking the Goswamis to write literatures to establish the philosophical foundation, he also asked some of the Goswamis and also some of the devotees, Bhugaba Goswami was one, wasn't it, to go and excavate the actual places. So concoctions come up like they'll say, oh no, this is the new Kumayara Pata, and this is the new place, and so the Goswamis went there specifically to say, no, this is actually where it took place. This is where the Rasalila took place. This is where Radha Kund is. This is where Shyam Kund is. This is Vamsigat. This is where Krishna. So they were able to confirm exactly where the places were. What's interesting about when you have alignment with self-realized souls who are not encumbered by the imperfections of conditioned souls, is that the knowledge that you get is very accurate. And there's a reference to Krishna's eyes being copper red in the verse Apachat Sudaracharo. There's no mention of copper red eyes in the Sanskrit, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that Krishna's eyes were copper red when he told Arjuna that he's still to be considered saintly, even if he commits the most abominable action, if he's rightly situated in his determination. So that's a little side detail that's not directly mentioned, but we see through the eyes of the acharyas, the shastras. And what's amazing about reading Srila Prabhupada's books is that if you refer back to Baladev Vijayabhushan, then you see where the example of the little bird comes from that was pecking the ocean, which illustrates determination. So that just comes out of nowhere when you're reading Prabhupada's purport, but then if you go back, you'll see that he's referencing the previous acharyas and then bringing all the particular. And some of the purports in the previous acharyas is very short, and Prabhupada makes it quite lengthy because he understands the audience that he's dealing with, so it needs some clarification, so that the meaning is not misconstrued. So we've just had a week of Shravana, the importance of hearing, and especially the importance of hearing what Srila Prabhupada has to tell us. And his books are considered the most authoritative reference. If he says something in a conversation or he says something in a letter, the book itself is the overriding governing factor. If there seems to be some contradiction, and it's his books especially, which are considered the most authoritative. The law books in ISKCON for the next 10,000 years. And we've just celebrated the Srila Prabhupada's arrival in America. And Shiva Ramaj was saying that day is more significant to us than Janmashtami or Radhastami or Govardhan Puja, all the different celebrations. Because we wouldn't have any of these celebrations if it wasn't for the fact that Srila Prabhupada had come over in the first place and told us about them. So Srila Prabhupada is putting us in the picture, and then he's showing specifically exactly where the places are and what is bogus, what is bona fide, so that we can hand this legacy on to future people that come, and to show that this is authoritative. There's so many, when I first started reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I'd never heard the expression before, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'd never heard that before. I'd heard of God, and maybe the Supreme, and I hadn't heard of God being referred to as personality. But Supreme Personality of Godhead is a very authoritative statement. When someone says that, then you would be inclined to think that this is this person knows what he's talking about. And what else is interesting is if you read Srila Prabhupada's books, he'll put forward the philosophy in a very authoritative way. And sometimes we'll have a book come out and it'll have a little description of what the book's about on the back of the book. And you can just tell it's not Srila Prabhupada sometimes. There's one Krishna book we had, and at the back there's a little reference to the Krishna book. And I was reading and I was thinking, is this Srila Prabhupada? Doesn't seem like Srila Prabhupada. And later on I was told, no, this isn't Srila Prabhupada, this is just, they've just put this in at the end to kind of attract people to read the Krishna book. Another interesting thing as well is one devotee was saying that when he first heard Srila Prabhupada, he'd been reading his books for some time before he became a devotee. And then when he heard Srila Prabhupada, he recognized the voice. It was the same voice that he could hear when he was reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Very authoritative, very convinced about what he was saying. You know? So it's not just knowing the philosophy. Knowing the philosophy is nice, but also the conviction that the philosophy is correct also needs to be there. And that can only be there if the philosophy has been implemented and has been realized. When we talk about realized, it really means making it real. Are you a real devotee? Are you AC or JC? You know what ACJC? ACJC. AC is actually chanting, and JC is just chanting. Are you actually serving, or are you just serving? Are you just reading the books, or are you actually reading the books? Are you just doing service, or are you actually doing service? You see? So this is the gap. So as our conviction deepens, and our realization and our faith matures, then the same information that one devotee can give, another devotee could give in a more convincing way. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur analyzes that a Kanishta can create a little bit of faith in somebody. A Majjhima can give somebody taste, but a Uttama Adhikari can give a person prema. And the devotee, the disciples of Prabhupada would say when they were around Prabhupada, if he was experiencing some bliss, some ecstasy, they were also allowed privy to experience that as well. So that's the potency. So as we become more potent, then we'll have more impact upon people that we come in contact with, rather than just we're engaging people more just because of their piety. They're quite pious. They feel sorry for the poor monk who has a hole in his dhoti and a turmeric stain on his kirta, so they give him a donation, but they're not really going to change their lives. Whereas with Srila Prabhupada, I mean, Srila Prabhupada landed in Russia. He only had a couple of days. Of all the people in Russia, how many millions, hundreds of millions of people, he bumps into one who dedicates his life completely to, and he did so much preaching. And what was that devotee's name? Yeah, that's it. He just recently, so you know, that's what happens when you become very malleable, like a puppet. We've been hearing recently, like a puppet in the Lord's hands. When you become like a puppet, then the Lord can put you right where we need to. Okay, we've got this person, I mean, you go over there. I mean, what are the chances? I mean, when we're trying to arrange to meet people, I meet you in the Red Square in Moscow, 9:15. We don't even get that together. We've got phones and everything. We still miss them. Well, the train was late. I was spaced out. I thought you meant 10:50. Prabhupada just steps out, meets the right person, says the right thing. So reading the books and also realizing the books. In fact, the first flowering of the hearing process is described as the ability to put into action what you're hearing. Because you can hear things, they can just go in there, and then they can just go out now. So you're hearing, but when it goes in there, and then it goes into there, then you're hearing. Because then you'll change, then your code of conduct will change. And you'll see things differently. They say that if you change the way you see things, the things you see change. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to see things Krishna consciously. We're trying to be everyone's well-wisher. We're trying to, it's a really, it starts off as a really kind of light, nice, kind of light lecture, then it becomes quite heavy and intense. It's Bhakti Maharaj's last initiation lecture, and he's talking there, he's encouraging the devotees to avoid offenses when they're chanting. And he's saying that if somebody's calling on the name of the Lord, but he's also has vulgarities going on in his mind and his heart at the same time. He said it's like somebody on the other side of the street and they're shouting, and then there's some profanities coming out as well, some vulgarities. So you kind of think, I don't want to get involved with this person. So you're on the side of the road and he's like calling you, hey you, yeah. And you're like, and then you maybe also, he said, you may also be wondering, is he referring to you? You're like, so you think, I just won't get involved. So if you're chanting and what's going on, he said we should be chanting very seriously and very sweetly. Seriously and sweetly. That's a nice affirmation, isn't it? When you sit down to chant, you chant this seriously and sweetly. And there's a tendency to blame the holy name. Well, can't blame me, it's not sweet. It's not very sweet to me. Are you chanting it sweetly? Are you just chanting, or are you actually chanting? So we need to sweeten up, and then we'll taste how sweet the holy name is. There's Shuddhanam, then Bhavana, and then Premanam. So Shuddhanam is just when we're chanting with full attention, no distraction, no offenses. And then there's Bhavana, that's when the emotions start getting involved. And then finally, Premanam. There's a nice story about Bhakti Thakur. There was a house that was haunted, and there was a Brahmin that used to go. I don't know whether he just did puja there or something. Anyway, he was involved with the house, and he told Bhakti Thakur, "Don't stay overnight. It's jumping with Bhutas. There's a really heavy Bhuta there." And Bhakti Thakur just. And the next day, they said, "How was it? Did you have any trouble?" And he said, "No, I just chanted Hare Krishna and the ghost left." And the Brahmin said, "But I chant Hare Krishna as well. I chant 64 hours a day." And then I said, "Well, that's the difference between Namaparad and Shuddhanam." So if it's not working, if the process isn't working, it means you need to work the process. Either that or you'll lose faith and decide to give up. Anyway, faith is what Srila Prabhupada wants to increase. That's what's being recommended. By reading Srila Prabhupada's books, you're making an investment in the faith account. And the nature of faith is, you can't decide, well, I'll read the books for 3 hours today, and then I won't read them for 3 weeks. Because if you have, I'm growing little echinacea plants right now, and they need nourished every day, or second day. The pots are so small, you see. So because the pots are very small, they can't retain a lot of moisture. So you water them, and they're saturated, and there's water coming out of it, that's fine. But within 2 days, the pots will be bone dry. So the nature of the heart in the beginning stages is that we don't have so much faith, so we need to keep topping it up and nourishing. She's going to tell you about the sexual tea, guys.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments? Need to keep topping it up, keep nourishing it. And then the Bhattilata beach will grow nicely. And then we have to avoid strangling it. And it's interesting, actually, Shiva Ramanuja was saying that the Vaishnavacharyas, when they're referring to offenses to the holy name, they immediately go to Vaishnava Aparad. They swoop in on Vaishnava Aparad as the main culprit, the main cause of offenses to the holy name, which is interesting, isn't it? Because there's 10 basic offenses, and the first one is blaspheming the devotees. So if you wanted to be proactive in avoiding making the first offense, then you may find Mahatma who has done a forgiveness course. And it's quite interesting because it's not something you would think was really relevant. And you think, oh, I'm okay, I forgive people. I don't know what's the point of doing a forgiveness course, you know. But if you examine it a little bit deeper, you'll see that the whole Trinada piece in each verse that Lord Chaitanya wanted us to hang around our necks is the most important. It's all about tolerance and forgiving, giving up resentment, giving up hatred. You forgive the person not because they deserve to be forgiven, but you forgive the person because you deserve to forgive them. It's you that deserve to forgive them more than they deserve. If you try and work out logical reason why you should forgive somebody, you may not find one. You may wait a long time. I'll only forgive him if he apologizes. Maybe he doesn't apologize because he doesn't think he's done anything wrong. So then you're stuck the rest of your life with resentment. So we can be proactive in avoiding offenses to the devotees by completely getting rid of, purging the heart of all resentment and forgive. The first stage is you just forgive the person. The next stage is you appreciate the person. Then the next stage is you pray for the person's. If you can sincerely pray that that person gets on in life and gets all the things that you want in your life, and you can really mean it, then you know you've forgiven. And then if you can actually serve the person, that's the highest. You can serve somebody that's done you some harm or offended you in some way, then you know you're completely forgiven. So, question from Peter.
Yeah, I have a question about the chanting.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it's like we should chant seriously and
sweetly.
Yeah? And I feel that's just one aspect, or this is just one way how we can chant, because we have so many different moods and we are in so different situations. And according to our mood and according to our situation, I think our chanting mood should be like this. For example, if we have a very big desire to be closer to Krishna, then maybe our chanting is not sweet.
That's a subcategory.
Yeah.
Under the broad heading of sweet and serious, there's so many subcategories, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if it's sweet and serious, you could be very humble, you could be very loving. It's all under sweet and serious.
But sometimes I met a devotee, he said some devotees they also would like to express their anger when they chant because they feel maybe separation and they are angry because of this separation. And can we be angry and sweet at the same time? Is that possible?
If it pleases Krishna, we can. If it doesn't please Krishna, then we shouldn't be doing it. So as long as it's pleasing Krishna. Sweet is that it pleases Krishna. Like sometimes the devotees would get angry. In fact, Krishna says, when my lover reproaches me in a sulky mood, it steals my mind from reverent hymns of the Vedas. So, and there was one man, he got angry with Krishna because he'd been worshipping Krishna every day, and he had the finest incense. This incense was £3.50 a stick. And he was asking for all these different things of Krishna, and nothing was happening. You know, his grandmother was still sick. His son hadn't got a PhD. The car was still a rusty old heap. So he turned around to Krishna one day and said, I've been offering this really good incense to you for over a year now, and there's nothing. So I'm not going to give you any more incense, no puja, and I'm going to put wax up your nose so that when I do light the incense, you don't even get a sniff. So you put the wax up the deity's nose, and you lit the incense. He was like that. And that night the deity came to him in a dream and said, okay, what is it you want? And he said, you're asking me now? After I've done puja, and yesterday I was so rude to you? And Krishna says, you've been doing puja for years to me, but yesterday was the first time you treated me like a person. I wouldn't recommend doing it, of course. He was just lucky, because it's up to Krishna. But that was sweet, and he was very serious. But the deciding factor is if Krishna is pleased. And that's why we have gurus, so that we don't concoct our own ideas of what it is. And we say, Guru Maharaj, I was thinking of getting really angry with Krishna. What do you think? He probably won't recommend it. If it's favorable, we accept. If it's unfavorable, we reject. So under the broad heading of chanting sweetly and seriously, then, sometimes we may be in a very sad mood, we may be lamenting, heart-rending lamentation. We feel so sad that we've turned our back on Krishna, and we've come to the material world, and we're chanting and we're crying. We're so sad that we've left him, we've let him down. We want to come back now, and we're just begging that he accepts us. So that's one mood. That's also very sweet and very serious. And if we're chanting in a sour and frivolous way, then that's very displeasing, you see. We can't expect Krishna to want to connect, if we don't take Krishna seriously, how can we expect Krishna to take us seriously? They say if you don't really want Krishna, then you won't really get him. You have to really want Krishna if you really want to get him. Otherwise you'll just get some version, some virtual Krishna, rather than Krishna himself. And Krishna says, if you become conscious of me, then you'll pass over all the obstacles. So that's the big if, that's the big challenge. Will you become conscious of Krishna? Will you connect with Krishna? And every day we have a chance to try for 1 3/4 hours. 1 3/4 hours we have a chance to try and connect. We make 99% of our advancement by chanting Hare Krishna. So that's really where the connection is. Any other questions or comments?
In terms of always chanting Hare Krishna, so if there's always chanting Hare Krishna, then there's going to be times that are more attentive and less attentive. Whereas if you just devote a certain amount of time to chanting, you can put more, logically speaking, you can put more effort into being attentive. So which is better, to chant all the time, or just to chant some of the time, the quality?
Well, the quality time is on beats, and the rest of the time is off the beats. So off the beats you could be driving and chanting, you could be peeling potatoes and chanting, but that's not counted as your 16 rounds. So that could be supplementary chanting. So that's okay. But if you were considering that, like I'm doing an illustration right now for Ramananda, and it's a man, he's listening. Was that okay? Did you see it? I sent it to you, emailed it. He's listening, he's at the gym, he's eating, he's chanting, he's doing so many things all at the same time. So if he was going to count that as his 16 rounds, then that wouldn't be good, Srila Prabhupada said 4 basic principles and 16 good rounds. And some say, well, because those 16 rounds are offensive, if you only chant 4 rounds, it's better because you make less offenses. But if I give you 16 apples and 4 are rotten, then if I only give you 4 apples, then only 3 of them are going to be good. So the more you chant, the more you can increase the good apples, increase your chances. In fact, if you've chanted 16 terrible rounds, you really want to chant another 16 rounds to make it. Because it's 16 good rounds. It's not 16 any old way you like it rounds. Sorry. Hare Krishna.
So I just wanted to share an interesting point that I read this morning in Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani by Shivaram Swami. He was saying about how dynamic is Srimad Bhagavatam. And, sometimes we may feel we want to get a little bit more in advanced stuff and the basics, we already heard it many, many times. And he was saying that Bhagavatam is dynamic in a sense that, like a person who is speaking and a person who is listening, if a person who is listening is more advanced, whatever is coming from the mouth, it will be so dynamic that you understand something much deeper than even a person who is speaking on a much deeper level, because Bhagavatam is Krishna, is revealed to himself according to the speaker. And he was giving an example how Srinivas Thakur, he was listening somehow or another, he was in this Mayavadi's lecture, and Mayavadi was giving him personal thing, but because Srinivas was hearing so absorbed in Krishna consciousness, he was just went in ecstasy. It gave him some deep purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was just ecstatic.
It's interesting. That same point it comes up in the Vidura Kandamini by Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, that if you don't have much taste, then if a person's not very hungry and you say, oh, it's time for prasadam, then you'll say, well, what's been cooked? And if he's not got much of an appetite, but if he's not eaten for 3 weeks and they say it's time for prasadam, he's not going to be too worried, he's going to, whatever it is, he'll have it, And also with kirtan, if the kirtan is accompanied with nice instruments and sung nicely, then he can get into the kirtan. But if it's sung by someone who's not got such a good voice, he can't play the kartal so nicely. But he has so much ruchi, so much taste, he's relishing. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to get his disciples who weren't so good at singing to lead, so that the other devotees would have to get into the kirtan based on hearing the holy name, not on whether it was going to stimulate the senses,
Yeah. Because this is not to minimize the fact that, of course, we need to prepare for Bhagavatam class, if you're giving it, or, try to make it attractive and study, when we sit down on Vyasa, then we can give a nice class that is interesting to everyone. But from the speaker's point of view, sometimes, listener's point of view, sometimes think, oh no, this person giving Bhagavatam class, they're going to fall asleep or something. But you can actually get into it if you know the value of it, and Krishna will speak to you.
Yeah, I think the classes will improve if the speakers know on the day, or they know a couple of days beforehand, and then they can prepare some quotes rather than just off the cuff. Because what tends to happen then is if you sit down to your class and you're prepared, then you tend to just time with what you're reading right now and it's inspiring you right now, and you try and make that relate to the class. That's the tendency. So apologies if you noticed that's what I was doing.
Just in the first point that you were talking about, two devotees were chanting and one of them sort of drove the ghosts away and the other one didn't. It's kind of it's a reflection, and I guess there's kind of a question tied into it, or at least a request for confirmation tied into it. It reminded me that this point that Prabhupada says in the Krishna's Killing Putana in Krishna book, where he says that wherever the chanting of the holy name is done, even neglectfully, witches and ghosts cannot remain. He says that in the purport. It says even neglectfully. So I was wondering, is that referring to that if we chant the pure holy name, that'll keep these inauspicious elements away? And for innocent people who don't know anything about the chanting of the holy name, who chant, they're chanting offenselessly. It's like when you ask people to chant on the street, they're chanting offenselessly because they have no knowledge. So it seems that those two extremes, that will keep inauspicious elements away, because sometimes devotees ask, well, I'm chanting and I'm getting I'm experiencing ghosts at night and things like that. So is it that this in-between stage, that's the problem stage?
Yeah, none of us, like Anjali was chanting none of us, it wasn't intentionally. using the holy name to sin on the strength of chanting. And then Namaparad. So initially, Shiva Rama refers to in that book, just chant more. He says initially you experience a lot of bliss in Krishna consciousness because you don't know anything. So you don't know that this is wrong. I used to read Krishna book in the toilet because I was scared my parents were going to see me becoming part of some cult or something. So I had it in a brown paper bag, whip it out the toilet, and my mum would be knocking on the door. "Are you okay, son? You've been in there for 2 hours." "Oh yeah, it's coming, Mum. I need some circle figs." So I didn't know that was offensive, that you're not supposed to touch the books. You know, if you've been to the toilet, you should really shower before you touch the books. Should be clean. The book should be kept in a clean place. But I didn't know, so there was no offense. Now that I know so much more, and Krishna's expecting a better standard from me. And if I decide I can't be bothered, never mind. I'm just gonna. At least I'll get some peace and quiet, and I'm reading the book for hours in the toilet. Then it's an offense because I know I shouldn't be doing that. So then it becomes Namaparad, and it's Namaparad doesn't bring any spiritual advancement. All it does is fulfill your material desires. But Namabhas clears, it's a clearing stage. So that's why it's really hard to have to be very careful about judging people, because we don't know how Krishna is. Like there was one soldier, and he got shot, he was lying, he was dying, you know, and a devotee saw he was dying, and he pushed through the crowd, and he looked over the shoulder. I mean, this soldier hadn't taken initiation or chanted or read books or anything, and he sees the devotee and he goes, "Who are you?" The devotee just goes, "Krishna," and the soldier went, "Krishna," and left the So there was some amazing arrangement there. So that's why we just have to get on with our own Krishna consciousness and not judge people. It's between them and Krishna. I seem to be better situated than him, but what's Krishna going to do in the final moments as he leaves his body? Maybe more auspicious than what I'm doing, you know? And maybe I'll become proud or complacent because I think I'm well situated. Yeah, so it's quite to simplify the whole dynamic, it's just, okay, I'm going to just try the best that I can. And if you're doing that, then you're Namabhas. And if you can't be bothered, then it's slipping into Namaparad. So you just try the best that you can with what you've got, with the situation you've been given, the body, the senses, the past karmic activity you've performed. They're all compromising your ability to practice devotional service. But if you're trying the best that you can, then Krishna makes up the difference. So that's, I mean, obviously, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I mean, he was saying Shuddhanam, he was being quite humble. He was chanting Premanam. It's, even in the universe, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is very rare. That story of Lord Brahma and Shiva, Narada Muni, and one or two other great persons, they were discussing this Apachat Sudaracha, and they were trying to, and they go, "Oh, look, there's Bhaktivinoda Thakur." He was doing a japa walk on the airways. And when he came to, Bhaktisiddhanta said to him, he was on the train, he says, "Oh, what just happened then?" He says, "I'll tell you when you're 16. And then when he was 16, he told him. And they'd seen Bhaktivinoda Thakur and said, "Oh, please, could you explain? We're a bit puzzled, So that's his stuff, on a cosmological level. There must be a lot of people in the universe, and then the top heads of the universe are puzzled about this, and then they ask Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and then we're in this succession. It's amazing when you think about it. So what he's chanting is way, way beyond, but at least we try the best that we can with what we've got. And the clearing stage will eventually bring us to Shuddhanam. Once Shuddhanam comes in, then everything goes a lot faster, a lot easier. And then all the ghosts start to go away. And we have our own ghosts as well, actually. We're haunted by what our parents have imposed upon us. And these voices, you have different aspects to your personality. You're the child, you're yourself as the adult, and then you come to what your parents have told you about yourself. You've got all that going on, You're trying to process all that and and find the real you. And assert yourself, I am a pure, unmotivated, well-intentioned living entity that wants nothing else than just to serve. That's who I am. And anything else is false ego.
One about our ghost who was reading a few days ago, and it was this verse: "Who is the desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel? Who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord?" And we didn't get beyond the first sentence of the purport because there was so much to discuss just about that. And Prabhupada was saying that the main vice in the age of Kali is quarrel. And we were thinking it's interesting because we tend to think of Kali Yuga as defined by the sinful activity, illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating. And he was saying that's not actually the worst. That's not the real sort of. These things are kind of byproducts, but the actual real defining quality of Kali Yuga is this principle of quarreling.
Hypocrisy. Anti-hypocrisy.
Yeah, quarrel and hypocrisy. And we were kind of discussing how, although there's so much quarrel going on in the world, the quarrel which creates the biggest disturbance to our minds is the quarrel that's going on inside our the quarrel that's happening in our own mind. There's this constant fight going on between the lower self and the higher self, and the indecision and the confusion. And in our own mind, we're constantly fighting and quarreling with ourselves. It's like we're haunted.
And quarreling is interesting because the four propensities: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Defending is the strongest one. Defending is the same as fearing, because we're defending our sex life, we're defending our sleeping, and we're defending our eating. We're fighting over food and facility. So the defending and quarreling is all about defending yourself, trying to protect yourself in some way. So you feel you have to stand up for yourself. And that's false ego. And in that book by Buddhajan, he says, actually, the mind isn't really a problem, it's in the mode of goodness. Because the false ego causes the problem. The false ego says to the mind, did you just see the way he spoke to you? And then the mind goes along with it. And then the intelligence is in the mode of passion. So the intelligence is thinking, okay, well, what we'll do, we'll dig a hole just outside this door. When he comes out, he'll fall down a 6-foot drop. There'll be broken glass bottles at the bottom of it. So the intelligence gets it. But the problem is the false ego. That's the problem.
Sri Rama was speaking about that just a few weeks ago and said that he said the same thing. The mind is in the mode of goodness, and the pure, uncontaminated mind is the mirror of the soul. It's the mirror of the self. So the problem is not the mind. The problem is everything that's covering the mind. It's everything that we've accumulated on top of the mind. That's the thing that's actually causing the problem for the mind. But the mind itself, in its proper state, is actually beneficial for practicing Krishna consciousness. It's in the mode of goodness. It's designed for practicing Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, what's interesting as well, I've been wondering about the mind, because when we think of the mind, we tend to think of a spot in between our eyes. The mind is kind of located here, you know? But then we talk about the heart as well. So the mind deals with thinking. We are on the mental platform, thinking about things. But the heart deals with emotions, with how we feel about things. Now it's interesting, look at Goswami, he talks about dancing in the courtyard of the heart. The courtyard of the heart. So that's interesting, isn't it? That there's another, looking at the body, we just cut the sternum and open it up and there's the heart. But there's a subtle body which has in it a courtyard. And that's the heart. And that courtyard, if you can get into that space and come from there, that's pure. And all the other stuff that's going on that we get distracted by, if we can somehow get into that courtyard of the heart, and there we can call on Krishna and connect and communicate with each other from the heart. That's what all this non-violent communication is about, you know. Some man, he pinned a woman down. They say that when a person gets angry, don't put your butt in his face. So he pinned this lady down. It was a shelter for drug addicts, and she didn't have any spaces left. And he said, have you got a room? And she said, no. The next minute, he was on a chest with a knife up against her throat. He says, don't you lie to me. Now, at that point, she could have said, but we don't have a room. She said, if she said that, he would have just, you know, but she said instead, okay. Instead, she connected to his heart. And she said, you are feeling so sad right now because nobody shows you any respect. And he immediately said, "You're damn right I am. Okay, maybe I'm an addict, but people should give me respect. You know, I'm just the same as anybody else." And then she just addressed his needs and connected with him like that. And then he calmed down. And then she says, "Well, actually, we don't have a room, but there is a place just around the corner. I can phone them up and get you in there." And everything was fine, you know. So we have to come from the heart, and we have to connect to other people's hearts. We have to look, what is that person needing? Okay, he's saying some really, really rude things. But really, all he's trying to say is please. And I'm saying some really rude things back to him. But really, all I'm trying to say is thank you. So we can push past all that mental platform. And, okay, that's a request. He's asking for this. He needs a room. Okay. Thank you for asking me for where the room is, and I'm very pleased to oblige you. Let's go and find you a room, you know. We get caught up on all the other. Okay, I'll finish. Let's go in the key.
Jai.
Shri Baba Ki.
Jai.
Go, Haven and the.
Hari Bol.